So this is the Guardian of Monday, 29th of March 2021, the front page of the Guardian of Monday, 29th of March 2021. And we are discussing this one first in the part 2 or part B of the KhoodeelaarTV television channel, broadcast online starting from 23:55 approximately GMT on Monday, 29th of March 2021. And the first item is about the police chief admitting that wicked race crisis is hindering fight against crime. Now, anyone who is familiar with the commentary and analysis and exclusive diagnosis of the state of policing in Britain and the other related agencies would know that we have been saying it for years, that despite the fact that the police is kind of cushioned by the routine promotional statement that policing in the UK is done by consent. Now, why do I say cushioned? Because that actually obstructs having an accountable police, because consent goes with accountability. I mean, consent presupposes the actual delivery of accountability by the police, who are supposed to be policing based on consent. Consent is also very much opposed to or opposite the coercion that is actually the reality in most of the cases of police contact or contact between the police and people in the African and Asian and other communities. And as I have said before, despite this Carmen inquiry, despite the Macpherson inquiry, and despite other miniature kind of so-called inquiries into policing and into the lack of accountability by the police, nothing changes for the better, and the consent is actually a fiction. Policing is not done by consent. Policing by consent is a fiction, has always been a fiction. And the fact that it has been allowed to persist for as long as it has done is another proof that democracy is not active in Britain, has not been active in Britain for decades, if not centuries. Earlier in part A, we discussed the Peterloo massacres. And in the Peterloo massacres are listed the armed forces and at least 2 magistrates or 3 magistrates in the Manchester area in Lancashire. So policing has never been done by consent. It has been a slogan. Whoever confected it actually infected a severe lethal lie into the narrative about policing. And the fact that the Guardian published in 2017, I think, the so-called investigative report about Theresa May as Home Secretary having given the direction to create a hostile environment against so-called illegal migrants, which actually had the impact, according to that particular investigation carried out by the Amelia Gentleman, the person called Amelia Gentleman in The Guardian. I mean, Amelia Gentleman is a white woman. Anything that a white woman says in that context must be secondary, not original empirical kind of statement. Now, contrast the literally hundreds of thousands of accounts that can be extensively and consistently published by Black people, both from the Caribbean Empire Windrush generation, as well as from the African backgrounds and, of course, Asian backgrounds and Muslim community backgrounds. But the Guardian would never give that kind of promotion and publicity or spot or platform to any of those hundreds of thousands of accounts. So the Guardian today saying that the National Police Council person admits that wicked race crisis is hindering dealing with the crime is a completely dishonest, inadequate, misleading statement by a lying racist Fleet Street paper. Of course, in comparison with the Daily Mail and the Scum and the Star and the Boris Graph, that particular headline and the accompanying stories that follow that particular headline in The Guardian comes across to any visitor from the Mars or outer space as being authentic and genuine and anti-racist. But it is not. The Guardian is one of the kind of pretense outfits that pretend to be not racist, but actually perpetuate racism more effectively and more without accountability. And it's not the victim, the result, the consequence, the damage, and the detriment caused by the Guardian's posture and position is wider ranging than the damage done daily by the Daily Mail and the Scum and the Boris Graph and others, because the Guardian pretends. So therefore, it takes a longer time to realize the details of the pretense and the diversion, the deflection from the real issues that the pretense actually represents. Actually represents, not apparently represents. Remember, the difference between actual and apparent, because it takes longer time to investigate the Guardian's own kind of lies. And the same applies to the Labour Party. For example, in the completely crass and stupid confection of the black section in the Labour Party during the mid 1980s of the last century was totally racist, because it created a departure from liability and responsibility owed to society and owed particularly to the African and Asian membership of the society and of the Labour Party. The duty owed to the people by the Labour Party was not a duty that was kind of fantasized about by anybody. It was a duty that was actually derived from the UK's continuing status as a signatory to all these conventions and treaties and declarations and agreements that actually encouraged the otherwise racist and backward and anti-democratic institutions in Britain, including the parliament, the government, the media, the judiciary, to bring into kind of operation practice at least at the beginning, a semblance of international standards of due process, fair say, fair access to the judicial institutions and the theoretical remedy, theoretically available through the judiciary. As we have been saying, but anyone who is watching this for the first time may benefit from the fact or the note that all the institutions, including the judiciary at every level, the police, the parliament, the Crown Prosecution Service, and the ancillary kind of sub-agencies, including the state agencies that are in place to be implemented and represented by the local councils. For example, the so-called kind of benefits regime, welfare benefits. All of these are contaminated, thoroughly contaminated by racism and by lack of accountability and by the obstruction to any kind of due process. So earlier in part A, I said, and I have said it before, that this is a collection of main apparatus of the state and the country that constitute together the Banana Republic. As if this Banana Republic evidence wasn't bad enough for society, the latest revelation about the corrupt and kind of congenital dishonesty as embodied and personified by Boris Johnson. And in relation to this American businesswoman, I say business within quotation marks, Jennifer Arcuri, illustrate the deepest possible corruption in public life that exists in Britain. I mean, Boris Johnson is daily, factually reported as having lied on the day or once or twice or more than twice. Every week, therefore, Boris Johnson is lying or making statements and policy decisions that are unsustainable and unfit for purpose and are in fact damaging. For example, the relaxation, so-called, of the lockdown rules and restrictions, effective 29th of March 2021, has been followed or preceded by serious warnings by various people who know the actual impact and implications of the decision that Johnson has boastfully promoted. Now, why he has done that, nobody has actually got an answer, or nobody has actually seriously asked a question. By nobody, I mean nobody from Fleet Street, nobody from the broadcasting counterparts of Fleet Street. So it appears that a license somewhere in outer space has been agreed and kind of issued, giving this congenital liar and a cruel person and corrupt person, Boris Johnson, endless impunity from all accountability, of a scale and of a magnitude that Donald Trump himself could only dream of. So the question is, in our diagnosis, what force or forces have given this impunity to Boris Johnson, that as a career liar and a career adulterer and a career abuser of public money to the billions, to the tunes of billions, he's never even called a criminal, let alone being charged with any crime. And he is everywhere. He's in post as the Prime Minister, he's in post as the leader of the Conservative Party, and he is in post as the kind of signer and offerer and presenter and approver of hundreds of billions of pounds of public money, public resources being given to the wrong people, to the bunch of crooks, robbers, and criminals. So it's not just a banana republic, it's worse than that. And as if all of that was not bad enough. The fascistic pack-up legislation against which all the locally confined demonstrations against the police have been happening. The police bill is not necessary. That is to say, that it contains various powers that are not necessary because there are any number of already existing acts of parliament that contain more powers than the police have ever needed or would have ever needed. And all of this is going on while the Labour Party stays dead. So, on to the question of the sexual abuse. When Johnson took Jennifer Arcuri to his family home at that time to perpetrate the adultery with Jennifer Arcuri, he was married to Marina Wheeler. And Marina Wheeler was away at work while Boris Johnson took Arcuri into the home, into the bedroom that he shared with Marina Wheeler, or the room or rooms that are the space or spaces that he shared with Marina Wheeler. And it is the sexual business. This is not a kind of made up account. This is what Arcuri has said, and this is what has been the interpretation. And there is no call from the Labour Party for him to resign. Think about this for 10 minutes. Because when Theresa May was imposed as Prime Minister, I think two of the prominent frontbenchers or members of her cabinet were forced to resign their positions over much less kind of serious, alleged kind of sexual misconduct by them. And here is Boris Johnson being featured in very detailed accounts in the kind of Fleet Street paper, at least the Mirror Group. And Mirror Group is, in terms of circulation, is not very far behind from the Scum and the Boris Gruff or the Mail. Its circulation claim is kind of less numerically smaller than those of the Daily Scum and the Daily Mail, but it is a significant circulation. So it's not like the Arcuri revelations have not been widely circulated. It is widely circulated. And yet there is no call, there is no evidence of any call for demanding resignation by Boris Johnson because of the whole series of lies that he uttered in denying that he had an affair or in denying that he did anything wrong. He did everything wrong. And today's statement, that is the statement issued in the name of Boris Johnson's office at number 10 Downing Street during Monday the 29th of March 2021. The statement was a denial statement in denial, made in Boris Johnson's name or in the name of his office, that is the Prime Minister's office, by Allegra Stratton. Now, Allegra Stratton is very much a common name between the two women. The first wife he had married was called Allegra something, Mostyn. Allegra Mostyn something. And this one is Allegra Stratton. Now, this name is very uncommon. It is known as a name, but it is very, very, very uncommon. So to have two Allegras in the career of or the same person is very, very rare and significant and raises a number of questions, because I'm actually using the historical evidential analytical device around names and nomenclature. And I'm saying that there must be something more than just coincidence in the appearance of this name in stories about Boris Johnson. So that is bad enough, but it is even worse when you look at the byline to the story on the Guardian's front page, dated Monday, the 29th of March 2021. That is another Allegra. It's not necessarily Allegra full similar kind of spelling, but it's almost 80% the same, Allegra something. Let's see what the actual spelling says. It's not a conspiracy, it's a diagnostic evidential analysis. Not the front page of the Guardian of Monday, it's the Guardian Online that published the item. That was the mistake, because I was thinking of the Guardian print version, but it's the item will be in tomorrow's Guardian, whatever page they put it on. But this is about the 4 years affair that Johnson had with Jennifer Arcuri. So I'm looking for the actual online item on the Guardian, and I'm examining the nomenclature that appears. The same nomenclature appears in all three items. All right, this headline, yes, this is a copy that was posted by the Guardian online. Okay, it's Monday the 29th of March, but it was posted at 17:43 hours BST, which also coincides with the GMT. Now, it's not Allegra, but it's Allegretti. And it's Aubrey Allegretti is the second name, political correspondent. And it says that Boris Johnson acted with honesty and integrity. Can you believe this? This is absolutely not the case. It is absolute lies. He never acted with honesty and integrity ever. And, this is saying that he, as London mayor, the allegation is too overwhelmingly full of evidence that he didn't tell the truth, and he behaved irresponsibly, and he behaved corruptly, and with the worst possible kind of lack of integrity and self-respect and dignity. This Allegra Stratton insisted Johnson had no case to answer in light of reports that City Hall has expanded its inquiry into his behavior. Now, this is a completely stupid sentence. Read this again and you will see the Guardian is in triple denial in that paragraph. It has been overly edited to completely confound its meaning, ordinary meaning. Allegra Stratton, now it doesn't say who Allegra Stratton is in that paragraph, but Allegra Stratton is the head of Johnson's propaganda unit at the number 10 Downing Street. And Allegra Stratton herself is a known fascist believer in the denial of benefits and rights to people who are poor. And the benefits include the fact that the people in poverty should not be allowed to have children, not as many as they naturally would like to have. And there is a whole story about Allegra Stratton's belief in fascism and limiting the poor's kind of opportunities. You can look up the Allegra Stratton. Allegra is spelled, of course, A-double-L, like all Egra, E-G-R-A. A-double-L-E, G for George, R for Robert, A for Apple. So Allegra Stratton. Stratton is spelled S for sugar, T for Tommy, R for Robert, A for Apple, T for Tommy, O for orange, N for Neil or no one, whatever. So Allegra Stratton is head of the number 10 Downing Street Press propaganda operation. And that is not mentioned by the Guardian. So Allegra Stratton, as if she is a universal name, she is not. Or universally recognizable name, she is not. So Allegra Stratton insisted Johnson had no case to answer. Now, instead of saying that no case to answer in light of reports about his affair with Jennifer Arcuri, it completely diverts from that sentence, the actual logical, textual, factual, evidential next step in that kind of factual statement. It says, in light of reports that City Hall has expanded its inquiry into his behavior after Jennifer Arcuri made a series of lurid allegations. Now, Jennifer Arcuri has not made the lurid allegations. Jennifer Arcuri has made fact-based claims about Boris Johnson's lurid behavior. Can you see what the Guardian is doing there? Completely criminally distorting even the facts that it is admitting. So what we are saying is that the Guardian itself is a lying outlet that has been among the kind of shielders, Fleet Street shielders of Boris Johnson personally and in terms of career, and to the severe detriment of democracy and public safety in this country that have been caused by his unfitness for purpose, unsuitability for purpose. So remember what we have said. This is not a piece that we are going to read in the whole, but just to give the example that the Guardian too is a corrupt criminal party in shielding Boris Johnson from the facts, the evidence of his lying. And the rest of the story, the copy, on the Guardian online that was updated or posted at 1743 GMT, which is mentioned as the BST here, British Standard Time, has not been updated. So there has been no kind of comments from the Labour Party, the opposition Labour Party at all. Let's check again. Now, they are quite happy, the Guardian's liars, to update on Ghislaine Maxwell. Because Ghislaine Maxwell, the daughter, quote, the favorite daughter, favorite child of the most notorious criminal, Robert Maxwell, is being still described as a socialite. Why are they glorifying her as a socialite? She was a pimp. And this story is about her pimping. So why are they calling her a socialite? Think about that. She's not a socialite. And she's not being held in custody because of her being a socialite. Unless, of course, by socialite, the Guardian has begun to refer to pimps of a particular type, of a particular income bracket that include clients and punters, like the second son of Brenda, the Queen Elizabeth II, Andrew, who was the only beneficiary and user of children. He was the pedophile, having sex with children provided or procured by Ghislaine Maxwell and Epstein. There is a contrasting piece on the Guardian online. We shall have to see whether it is actually printed in the print version of the Guardian, dated Tuesday, the 30th of March. Now there is a piece, this piece is headed David Cameron and Green Seal Capital. 10 unanswered questions. Now let's see what the main 10 questions, main ones on the 10 questions are. The financial services company Green Seal Capital collapsed this month, which could trigger the demise of GFG Alliance, a conglomerate owned by Sanjeev Gupta, who owns the third biggest steel company in Britain. If Gupta's Liberty Steel goes under, that is, if it sinks, then 5,000 British jobs are at stake. And then on the third paragraph only, it begins to refer to David Cameron. According to that headline, Cameron should have been the main topic, the main name in the first paragraph. But it waits until the third paragraph. And it is shielding Cameron. The former Prime Minister, David Cameron, is facing demands to explain his relationship with Greensill Capital's founder, Lex Greensill, the son of watermelon farmers, who was made an advisor to the government in 2014 and appointed as CBE in 2017, after Cameron left office in the wake of the EU referendum defeat. It doesn't say that he is the one who foisted on the country the Brexit thing in the first place, the referendum and everything else. He became an advisor to Greenseal's company. So far, Cameron has declined to speak on the record about his relationship with Greenseal or his attempts to lobby on his behalf. The questions that remain unanswered include who introduced Cameron to Lex Greensill? Was it your former cabinet secretary, Sir Jeremy Haywood? And what role did you play, if any, in providing Greensill with a security pass? And all of these questions, let me say, are absolutely fact based, but they won't be answered. And it is unlikely that The Guardian will investigate them as thoroughly as it could, and it should, and it must. And none of the other right-wing fascist, Brexiteering outlets like the Daily Mail or the Scum or the Boris Graph will actually provide the details or the answers. But what it illustrates, what it proves beyond any doubt about the fact that Britain is a banana republic, a corrupt republic, an undemocratic republic, and a racist republic, and a republic that is being prepared, groomed, and pumped to become a fascist republic. That is the extent of it, that is the severity of it. And while all of this is happening, Keir Starmer has killed off the Labour Party. Now, this woman, Zoe Williams, I mean, anyone who is kind of watching this must know extremely well the corrupt Fleet Street operation and history. If they don't, then it will take hours to introduce each aspect of the crooks. Now, this woman, Zoe Williams, who is a columnist on The Guardian or is a, quote, Guardian columnist, as they boastfully peddle, is one of those people on The Guardian that kind of has a ticklish kind of, has a propensity to tickle the targets of her alleged kind of disapproval. I mean, she doesn't really diagnose them thoroughly. She doesn't rigorously analyze them. She doesn't dispose of them on the facts and on the evidence. So what she's doing is like the editor of the Private Eye, Ian Pissoff, who tickles. I mean, the entirety of the Private Eye coverage about the UK Parliament and the Street of Shame and anything else, including the judiciary, and I'll come to the very weird approach that the Private Eye takes on the judiciary, while at the same time tickling it. Now, Zoe Williams appears to be, well, she is like a Janet Street Porter in the terms of the content. In terms of the content and the agenda and the style, not necessarily the style, literal style, but style of her writing and kind of opinions. So she's a woman. I mean, that is the kind of plus point in her favor, as Janet Street Porter was a woman. And that does meet the diversity requirements and the gender gap requirements, etc. But when she actually goes into the body of anything she's writing about, and she pretends to be writing about some contentious things, she collapses. She doesn't have the kind of integrity of analysis, of ethics or morality or evidence. And in common with the rest of the Guardian columnists, Zoe Williams pretends to know the society, pretends to know ordinary people, but she doesn't. Of course, she goes to ordinary shops and does the ordinary living, but the point is that she doesn't have any real solidarity, any real kind of empathy with the people who have the real life kind of detriments and losses of rights that she pretends to know about and write about. Okay, so that is Zoe Williams, also introducing the general type of the Guardian columnist. And this is the pretense, this is the tickling thing. All the pomp of the new number 10 briefing room was wasted on a COVID press conference of little substance. This sounds like she's dismissing both and there are details of the kind of stupidity of the spin that Boris Johnson spewed at the news conference. So what it doesn't say, that is Zoe Williams doesn't say that the idiocy of Boris Johnson's news conference shebang only highlights the urgency of the need for a proper, democratically active, accountable opposition in parliament. And it doesn't say anything about the losses of lives in the way that it should say. It has references to COVID-19 and all the rest of it, but it is not a rigorous piece. And Zoe Williams doesn't write rigorous pieces. When she appears, sometimes I haven't watched or suffered the appearances on these channels, either the BBC News channel or Sky News, where she had been. I mean, I suffered this before the COVID thing and lockdown. And when she did have the appearance or slots, or was slotted in either of those or both of those, she came across as being, again, full of tickling kind of content, but had no continuous, consistent narrative against the corruption that she should have pointed out and railed against and condemned. On Sky News especially, which is a corrupt platform because it's owned by the crook, or was created by the crook Rupert Murdoch, too many criminals posing as experts on this or that were given slots or platform on the so-called press preview slot. And too many of them were aggressive. And when those were one of those, let's say there were 5 or 6 of them that I could name. I'm not going to name these criminals now in this particular broadcast, but Joy Williams was pitted against one of those criminals. And they would shout at her, shout her down, and they would dismiss her and dismissively refer to her kind of attempt at making her statement, however kind of incoherent or disunited and lacking in integrity those were, as I have said earlier. I think that Zoe Williams was kind of underestimated or undermined by sexist co-appearees. This is not an endorsement of Zoe Williams's point of view. That is not what I'm saying. I'm saying that as a woman, she was shouted down more often than not. So that shows another weakness that is inherent in the Sky News or the BBC News channel, because the presenter of the particular slot or particular edition failed to protect her or to tell off the sexist, misogynist co-appearee who was dismissing her almost regularly. So Zoe Williams is one of the Guardian columnists that has been given the platform. And it is not just Zoe Williams. The Guardian has had, over the years, at least 5 or 6 of its columnists and writers or contributors appear as guests on the Sky News of BBC News Channel editions about so-called newspaper review. They don't review the newspapers at all. We do the diagnosis, which is more than reviewing, much more than reviewing, and their kind of choice of serving or active and current kind of writers and stringers and correspondents and freelancers linked to the Guardian or other newspapers gave the game away because they were not interested in running a platform that was critical of the media. We are, but they weren't. They were using the newspaper front pages mainly. And I'm sure they still are doing that despite the social distancing and remote broadcasting, which has replaced the previous in-studio live broadcasting. They're doing the same thing, and that doesn't actually serve the cause of democracy, cause of accountability. And although in part A we have discussed Kevin Maguire of The Guardian admitting that Boris Johnson is a liar and a cheat and all the other things, Maguire is another kind of Fleet Street based or Fleet Street linked quote journalist that has been given too many sports and platforms to do the so-called press preview. And his almost consistent partner, pretending to be opposed to Maguire's supposed pro-labor kind of views, has been a very sick, corrupt, racist man in denial, which is, he writes a column praising Boris Johnson, praising the Tories, and praising anything that is conservative in the Daily Mail group. And his name is Andrew Pierce. And he has got a Twitter account which he boastfully calls Tory Boy. And the Tory Boy is actually the expression that Kevin Maguire uses about Andrew Pierce. And I think Andrew Pierce has named his account after that. And Andrew Pierce is a fiercely racist, in denial, anti-Muslim liar who was one of the regular appearees on the BBC's Dateline London, BBC Television's Dateline London platform. And it was during the years of ongoing assaults by Tony Blair and George W. Bush on the people of Iraq and other Muslim countries that Andrew Pierce and Michael Gove and Julia Heartless, a bad word, and Polly Toynbee appeared. And they praised and they agreed with the attack, the idea of the attack against the Muslim countries and the massacres of the Muslim men, women, and children. None of them said a word against the massacre of Muslim men, women, and children. So what I'm saying is that every single identifiable perpetrator of propaganda from Fleet Street and from the mainstream kind of television channels directly linked with their connection with Fleet Street is on the evidence, not because I don't like them. Of course, I don't like their opinion, but I have no particular personal kind of interest in, whether liking them personally or not. It is on the contents of their contributions that I am saying what I'm saying. And what I'm saying is that they are not doing by what I have summarized them as doing. They're not serving the cause of freedom of expression or free speech or kind of publishing truthful news or objective news. Many years ago, when I was in Dhaka, remember, I never worked in return for money. I am a prolific writer and I wrote more than anybody else. Or I wrote more articles and more pieces than the entire reporting staff of the other newspapers combined. So I was forever looking for evidence, investigation, to tell the truth. And as part of that, I attended a promotional event held at the Dhaka office of the United States Information Service, what was called USIS. And they had probably one kind of reporter associated with one of the US newspapers or news organizations. And this was organized, this meeting, which is a small meeting, was organized apparently to educate the local journalists of then Dhaka about the high values and principles of the American journalism. And the topic of that particular item, or the headline of that particular talk, if I remember, it's very, very many years ago, the fictional way or style or approach, but fiction was there, of factual reporting. So fiction and factual, those are the two key core aspects of the particular theme. And I did a very authentic interpretation of it into Bangla. So my piece was, in fact, exceptional because nobody else did the standard, the quality of the piece that I had published in one of the organs. But what I'm saying is that the pretension on which they base that kind of seminar or talk, whatever, was a completely fiction-based pretension. Because the American media, like print media or the already broadcast media, cable and whatever was available at that time or about to be installed, never operated on the basis of telling the truth. I mean, all the President's Men and the investigation by the two Washington Post reporters was an exception and remains an exception. Even to this day, even after all these things. And the same pretense applies to the UK kind of journalists and whatever. And I have diagnosed both the ones that are not within my empirical and personal actual experience, and also those which are within my experience. And I have added to those two sources, if you like, other materials obtained from other sources. Altogether, it is the fact that the reason why the Daily Mail demolished personally demonized and demolished Jeremy Corbyn was nothing to do with telling the truth to the public. Just as the Daily Mail carried out a crusading kind of attack on the previous leader of the Labour Party after the Labour Party was ousted at the 2010 election, Ed Miliband, because Ed Miliband's father was a Polish Jewish immigrant, was condemned by the Daily Mail as a traitor to Britain and not a patriot. Now, that was absolute rubbish, absolute lies. But they did that in order to demolish and destroy the Labour Party's credibility. And the Labour Party has failed. Even after that, the Labour Party has failed to understand that. Instead of understanding that and tackling it and opposing it and putting an end to it, the Labour Party is moaning. I mean, the likes of Corbyn has got a few kind of residual followers and fans who are moaning, and they're focusing on the emotional aspect of it. The reason why the attacks on the Jeremy Corbyn leadership of the Labour Party was conducted was the same as the attack on the father of Ed Miliband was conducted. Now, logically, when Corbyn was being attacked by the Daily Mail, Ed Miliband, who never ceased to be an MP, should have come forward and should have completely destroyed the Daily Mail's attack on Corbyn. But he didn't. So you see the real divide and gap, and the reason why the demonization of Corbyn succeeded. Because the Labour Party, even with such ample evidence that the Daily Mail had the political agenda to destroy democracy, kill democracy, because the agenda that they suspected the Labour Party would implement, either under Ed Miliband or under Jeremy Corbyn, would be opposed to the agenda that the Daily Mail's owners want enhanced, and that is the agenda for creating dark age, backwardness, going back centuries, and robbing people of their rights and other consequences, similar consequences. This is why the Daily Mail is protecting Boris Johnson and is not running anything about Jennifer Arcuri. Now, Boris Johnson has abused too many kind of times the position in elected position, both as mayor in London and also as foreign secretary, and as prime minister he has been. And all of these are known, and yet there is no opposition. So it's not just the Conservatives that are doing the agenda, it's the Labour Party has been essentially, in the main, being controlled by the same interests and the same forces under various pretexts and various banners. So when I say it's banana republic, in terms of democracy, it is worse than a banana republic, because they are preparing this country to become a fascist country. And there is no opposition from the Labour Party. There is no opposition from the other so-called parties, because they are numerically smaller, but they could have made a big thing out of this fascistic bill for giving fascistic powers to the police to suppress democracy. But they're not doing it. And we go back to the question of the Tower Hamlets Council, local council, failing its safeguarding duties to the 4 schoolgirls from Bethnal Green. I have searched and there is no evidence that anyone, quite apart from the fact that Tower Hamlets Council has not done anything about these girls, no MP in Tower Hamlets or in the name of Tower Hamlets has said anything. So what we are building up is a series of factual kind of pillars on which to create the case for long-ranging, wide-ranging constitutional law, international law, and human rights law actions against Tower Hamlets Council and on behalf of the children that were due and owed safeguarding duties and were denied those. And the details we have already made known because it's all on the record. And the main key point is that their lives have been destroyed by the negligent, knowing behavior by the Tower Hamlets Council during the calendar years, starting in October 2010 and ending, let's say, sometime in 2017 or 18. But the point is that even if the children, the girls, are now, including those 2 who are presumed to have been killed, now they would have been 18 or 19 years old or 21 years old, as Shamim Begum is. Most of their lives as secondary school children, the years during which they must have been targeted for grooming and misleading, diversionary kind of engagement and departures from their ordinary course of life or lives. Those years coincide with the neglected safeguarding duties by Tower Hamlets Council. So the case is very strong. And we are doing this despite the fact that none of these sitting councillors now, and when we say now, we refer to the 26th of February rubber stamping rule by the Supreme Court, or during any time, during any years between October 2010 up to the 23rd of April 2015, and since 2015 up to the 26th of February 2021, none of the councillors in place at any time during those periods has made a statement about these girls. And it is clear that we introduced these references, these frameworks, these concepts of safeguarding duties. Although on the record, these concepts have been available, but they have not been known to any of the councillors until we started the campaign in late February last month, a month ago. So safeguarding children duties doesn't, as a phrase, doesn't appear at all in any of the posts that any of the councillors had made, if they made any references to these girls at all. And they only began to refer to this concept, and the references have been completely inadequate, typical. But that typical inadequacy of references or referred to materials is to do with the fact that most of the councillors are not properly schooled. They are not educated, that is a given, but they're not even properly schooled and they're not trained. And their actual exchanges are confined to their kind of their peers who are lacking in basic knowledge and awareness. Most of these people communicate by tweeting and retweeting one another, publishing connections and praise for one another. So that is also a given. But the concept of safeguarding children duties being unknown to them is not an accident. All the duties that a local council, including Town Hamlets Council, owes to the electorate, to the community that is covered by the framework of the council, these are unknown to these councillors, including some of those who are kind of boasting that they are campaigning for local issues. Whatever they're doing are again tickling and inadequate. And none of the activities that they are allegedly campaigning about is actually being integrated with the whole campaign, the whole issue of demand, calling for action against the negligent council for causing severe destruction of the qualities of life, and including those two guards who are presumed to be dead by now, destruction of lives. So safeguarding children duties being neglected has actually resulted in at least two of the guards being dead or being killed or being kind of known or reported to have been killed, and they could have been saved, literally saved, by the council following and upholding and carrying out and implementing its safeguarding children's duties. So what we are looking at today, which is now, we have crossed into Tuesday, the 30th of March, 2021, and we're looking at Ghislaine Maxwell faces new charges, including sex trafficking of a minor. And their main topic, the heading to that item, is Jeffrey Epstein. That should not be the headline. The headline should be the Queen's son, Andrew. Because Epstein is not a Briton. And he's not the kind of topic, it's the actual behavior of Andrew, the second son of Brenda, the so-called Queen of England. And they only referred to Andrew, two paragraphs before the last paragraph in this story. Epstein and Maxwell's arrests have spurred intense scrutiny of Prince Andrew, who was a friend of both purported sex traffickers. They don't say reported, they say purported. And Virginia Giuffre, one of Epstein's many accusers, alleged in a civil lawsuit that Maxwell lured her into Epstein's circle under the false pretense of massage work. Now that raises a lot of questions about safeguarding children duties neglected by the US equivalents of the Town Hamlets Council. After being pulled into their orbit, Maxwell forced Virginia Giuffre to have sex with powerful men. It's a plural, including Prince Andrew, the Duke of York, when she was just 17. Maxwell denies the claims. Andrew directly and via statements from Buckingham Palace has vehemently and repeatedly denied all of Giuffre's claims. This is, of course, something that has been reported elsewhere. But the essential fact is that the Guardian is shielding Andrew from the factual contents that it is publishing about his pedophile and perverted kind of exploitation of children for sex. And the role that Brenda has played about in shielding Andrew is also significant. She has not condemned him, and she has not, of course, ousted him from the circle of the Buckingham Palace, really. And she has not kind of caused him any loss of his privileged access to her kind of monarchy. And that shows the corruption of the monarchy. I mean, those people who say that they're only condemning the hangers on and they're not condemning Brenda, they're being dishonest as well. Because Brenda's role, nobody wants to condemn her personally, whatever her personal position is. But she is the person who personifies the monarchy. And as I said, I mean, in January 1981, I published an editorial call for Brenda to speak out against racism in this country. Now it's 40 years ago. And 40 years later, she is accused of fronting a racist royal family. Think about that. I was 40 years ahead of all of this, and she should have actually responded to my call and published a statement and spoken out against racism, or she should have begun to speak regularly against racism. But she hasn't. And that actually was how long ago? 81, from 1977, when Diana was murdered. And the one reason, not the whole reason for her being murdered, was the fact that she was seeing a Muslim that they didn't like and they didn't want her to see. And other allegations that the father of the victim, Muhammad Fayad, has made. In effect, they have all been, in terms of the motive, the prejudice, the racism, and the hostility against Muslims, that Fayad literally mentioned and implied, have substantially been vindicated, if you like, not necessarily the particular incidents. And Fleet Street is not covering those things. Those are the central things. The Fleet Street is deflecting attention from the main story, the main event being what actually is at the center of the allegations. And the center of the allegations against the Brenda and the monarchy has been that Meghan Markle was treated with prejudice and bias and hostility and was kept at a distance out of motivation of racism on the part of those who did the behavior. Now, if it wasn't Brenda herself that was included in doing that kind of thing, then she should have come forward and corrected the perception that she was racist, and she should have said that I'm not a racist instead of Williams. Williams is only a child. I mean, lot removed from Brenda, because Brenda is still the monarch, sitting monarch. And Williams is her grandchild, one grandchild out of many. So he cannot speak for the whole family. He's only arrived 37 or 38 years ago. And Brenda has been around nearly 100 years ago now, since for 100 years. And she's been enthroned for more than 60 years. So Brenda should have spoken in detail and given a world-ranging kind of speech. But it seems that she doesn't think nearly enough importance. She doesn't give nearly enough importance to the magnitude of the allegation that Meghan Markle has made. And the entirety of the British racist kind of apparatus has been shaken by the claims by Meghan Markle, which is why one of the most corrupt and dishonest members of the so-called Fleet Street is now almost acting as part of the gang, of racist gang that want to discredit Meghan Markle. As I have said before many times since the broadcast of the interview they gave to Oprah Winfrey, because of Oprah Winfrey and the American kind of perspective, unlike Wallis Simpson, the equation has been fundamentally shifted. And Brenda is now increasingly getting into a corner, despite the fact that Fleet Street morons keep assuring her that they are behind her. They may be behind her, but they're not behind her to save her. They're behind her to stupidly kind of expedite her being submerged in this, which she should not have been, but she is being submerged in this because, contrary to the anti-Muslims who say that the parents in West Yorkshire who are protesting against the Batley Grammar School teacher who showed a cartoon that had been actually published first by Charlie Hebdo in France. The cartoon by Charlie Hebdo against Brenda and showing Brenda as a racist white American policeman strangling the black victim, and the black victim being played by Charlie Hebdo's version of Meghan Markle. This is far-reaching. This is not going to be forgotten. And this is indicative of the international kind of hostile response that is being kind of caused against the monarchy. Anyone who genuinely believes that the British kind of royal family should be allowed to continue and preserve is mistaking Fleet Street portrayal against Meghan Markle as being enough of an insurance and defense against the deadly, lethal kind of reality. No Andrew Neil, nor Pierce Moron, nor Carol Moron, nor any of the liars like Julia, Heartless, whatever, can stop the international kind of perception that Brenda has been fronting a very racist royal family. Now that's a reputational damage that cannot be repaired by the liars of Fleet Street or the liars of the BBC or Sky News, or by the liar Boris Johnson, who is completely lacking any moral authority now. He has got no moral authority because of all the continuing disclosures about his immoral behavior, dishonest behavior, etc., etc. So Brenda and the Fleet Street and Johnson, if they want to take back control, because Brenda has been a Brexiteer, remember? The only option, the only way forward is to stop lying and stop pretending that racism is something that is a peripheral issue. It is not. The momentum against racism that is building both in the USA and the UK is something that has been long overdue. And the interview broadcast by Oprah Winfrey is going to be a very considerable item of evidence to be used against racism in the USA and against the racism of the Buckingham Palace and in the UK. No amount of Andrew Neil and Piers Morgan can stop it. So we shall be talking more about all of this in the next edition. This is just after, I think, or just coming up to 01:15 hours GMT, which is a 1:15 local time in the UK on Tuesday, the 30th of March, 2021.